Okay. Amazing. So, choice number four, creating versus reacting. Who wants to start us off? Anyone care to open? I'm happy to do so if not.
I don't mind saying a few things. Um, the person that came to mind when I read this choice was Stephen Covey. Um, I'm sure most of you know Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, where pretty well, I guess, if I could summarize the book, which I still think is one of the best management and leadership books ever written, is that he talks consistently about creation. He talks a lot about choice. And one of the chapters is talks about everything is created twice, first in your mind and then in reality. He also talks about in a piece on it's not effectively managing time, it's more a way of being, um, extensively about being proactive. And each one of the different parts of this particular choice took me to Covey and what he was talking about in terms of proactivity, choice, creating our reality. And it's just dovetailed in really, really well. And if you don't know the book, it's quite old, but the pages of mine are browned and thumbed and dog leafed and marked. It's a great book, and it dovetailed really well in with this chapter for me.
Not one I've read. Um, do you remember off the top of your head what the seven habits are? I think synergy was one of them.
Yeah, the last one, sharpened the saw. Um, uh, begin with the end in mind, because what he's saying is be aware of where you want to get to, otherwise you'll never get there. And don't worry too much about how you're going to get there. Just go with the process. But at least you know where you're heading for, which I really like. But the others, not off the top of my head. I just know the content, not necessarily the chapter title or the seven habits. But yeah,
Yeah, thanks for recommending that. That's not one I've read. Um, which particular aspect of creating versus reacting reminded you of that book? Was
uh, it. Well, he talks a lot about creation. I mean, he talks about creating your own life rather than and proactivity. So proactivity, the opposite of reactivity. Um, and there's one particular chapter. I can't remember what it's called, but I know it as Covey's four quadrants. And what he recommends is that if you do look at the book or even a preview of the book, if you look at quadrant two, which are doing things which are not urgent but important. So these are the things we tend to put off. So in life, on the matrices, is important and not important, urgent and not urgent. And in life, there's stuff that's urgent and important, and we just got to deal with it. It happens every day. You know, you have a leak in the sink, or your car's broken into, or something happens, and we need to deal with that. The place to put yourself is dealing with things that are important but not urgent. In other words, being proactive about things. So it's things like recreation, it's things like planning, it's things like um, not just planning, but thinking in general about where you want to go to. And that's the place to be. And the place to get that time for those things is from quadrants three and four. And very often people are spending time doing things which aren't urgent and aren't important. So why are you doing it at all? For instance, scrolling through social media. And once you're on that page, the algorithm is so clever now, it just takes you on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing if you choose to let it, or you choose to say, hey, I'm not going to get drawn into that, and you create the future that you want. So that's the reason he's he's talking, and my life is about proactivity rather than the reactivity. So if you're reacting, I mean, there's a really good piece on choice in there, which is what the whole book's about, which is choice. So I came across the choice model probably 25 years ago. Now the Viktor Frankl version, or whoever you choose to decide, between stimulus and response is a gap, and in that gap is your moment of choice. And the way to give yourself more choices is to extend that gap. So you've got a stimulus, and before you react, you give yourself extra time to be in that bit of space and develop a reaction which is going to be good for you or the other people that you're with. It may not be you, it may be loved ones or a client or whatever it is, but very often we get tied up in the speed of things, the speed of reaction. The environment that we live in these days is so fast and furious. We don't give ourselves time as a result of a stimulus to step back and say, hey, what's the best way of reacting to this? We just do it like that. And everything in our lives, everything, that's very definitive. A lot of things in our lives are driving us to do more and more quickly. And if there's one thing that I think about regularly, it's just slow down. Because actually, if you don't do what you want to do, 9 times out of 10, who cares? It doesn't matter. My last newsletter was called "Doesn't Matter" because most most things in our lives that we think are really important, are you going to be worrying about it in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year? And the answer is usually no. So why do we worry about it so much? Why don't we just take a little bit of extra time, slow down, and come up with a creative solution that's going to make a significant difference rather than just a fleeting, oh, done it, on to the next thing? Does that answer your question, Will? Or does it move towards answering your question?
Are more than answers. It's given me some gold. I've come across the four quadrants. What it was taught to us at uni as they called it the time management matrix. Um,
Or Eisenhower sometimes.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So, and it sounds like Stephen Covey uses that in his book as well. Uh, I love that you've applied this distinction within that. It makes perfect sense, particularly the spending time doing important, not urgent. The thing that came up for me there was space. There's space baked into that thing. Could you repeat? I saw a couple of nodding heads. I think Chris and Karen. It looked like you recognised.
And thanks, Dennis, for posting the link in the chat there. Thank you.
Yeah, it looked like Chris and Karen recognised something you referenced. Um, the choice model. Was, who's that by?
You asking them or me?
You.
It's attributed to a number of people. It's purely the model is between stimulus and response. There's a gap, and in that gap is your moment of choice. And a lot of people say, I don't have a choice. The reality nearly all the time is that we do have a choice. It's just that people don't want to accept the outcome of that choice. So they pretend they haven't got a choice. So it's like if you're in accommodation and you pay rent or a mortgage, it's a choice whether you pay it or not. You don't have to pay that rent or that mortgage, but most people do because they want to have a roof over their head. But it is a choice. And it slips by us. We slip into so much where we think, I don't have a choice. And the reality is that in pretty well everything we do, we have a choice. It's just that sometimes we don't accept, recognize, or believe we have a choice because we don't like the sound or the outcome that that choice will give us. So we always have a choice as long as you're prepared to accept the outcome.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Jeff. Sash.
Hello, everyone. Um, there was a couple of things in this one that really kind of spoke to me. Um, Probably on the first page, really kind of in the first few sentences, just jumped out straight away was where you said in regards to the ego, where it says my ego has to be protected from that, even though I know deep down that my ego is, as Ken Wilber says, kept in existence by a collection of emotional insults. that that part really kind of spoke to me, and it made me think about how the ego protects your inner child, and how the inner child is built up of other people's emotional reactions, and their how they react to situations, and the inner child is built this kind of sense of beliefs based on other people's emotional reactions, which I thought it tied in really nicely as a full circle. And the kind of ego protecting that inner child is something I've been really working on for maybe like a year or so. Um, and having that kind of practice of, that feeling where you feel that ego goes into protective mode because it feels that like physical, like it's really quick, like you can feel it. You feel a bit like uncomfortable because you know that somebody is hitting a nerve and you need to look at it. And yeah, that kind of line just really, really sunk in for me. Um, and the other one was where he was talking about coloring the world with my mood. I'm definitely a culprit of doing that. I really loved how the kind of analogy of having gloomy paints, you know, the paints that you've chosen to have, that's the picture that you're then going to create. Um, which I can definitely feel in relationships. I've got my partner, we live together, so we're very busy all the time. We'll come home and maybe have like an hour or two together, tired, like typical day, and I can definitely see like um, patterns with the way that the paints that I use in my life and how I view that person in my life as well. Because if I've got a bad mood, that then translates in conversation. And it made me think as well that how you have two people that kind of, if I've got muddy paints, maybe I'm then muddying their paint as well, and then their paints get muddy, and then they're painting a muddy picture, and how you come together in conversations, and that can kind of affect each other's moods as well. And I thought it was quite powerful how you can create that for yourself, and in turn, that will actually affect others around you as well and allow them to be in better moods, and how the way that you create things, as he said with that example of the email, you know he's kind of done that as a practical example, which I really loved as well.
Mm. Mm. I want to check if you're pointing at the same thing. If I'm noticing, if we're seeing the same thing, and it's actually a phrase that Dennis taught me, which is more is caught than taught.
Mm.
That we rub off on people. Is that what I'm hearing when you say, I show up in a certain way and I've got my color palette, and that's how I'm painting the canvas I'm seeing of my life, and that uplifts other people. Is that what you're pointing at?
Yeah, 100%. And I can't remember where I read it, but I read in a book somewhere that um, with humans and the way that we connect physically, and how energy is passed on. So I used to really struggle with social anxiety, and I think it was around social anxiety. And they said, "Oh, if you have anxiety, either subconsciously the people around you in the room are gonna have that energy passed to them because it feels like there's something to be threatened, like because the humans, anxiety shows a threat. That's kind of the natural feeling for it. So then that anxiety feeling gets actually transitioned to the people that are in the same room as you because it's like a human instinct for survival. So then off the back of that, you feel anxious, And when you do that to a modern kind of day where you might be having a conversation, they then feel that anxiety. So they feel a bit like, oh, something's not quite right here. And then that fuels a really like uncomfortable, awkward conversation. And then you're kind of going, oh, well, this is really awkward. And then it makes it kind of, you bounce off each other. And once I learned that, I started to kind of practice that in conversations. So I was like, oh, well, if I'm feeling awkward, I'm definitely going to have an awkward conversation. So I need to then learn ways to kind of fake a different type of conversation. And from then on, I was able to talk to anybody in any position, you know. And it's really interesting, I think, how humans kind of really take on energy. It can have that ripple effect.
Yeah. Yeah. One of this reminds me of a real breakthrough moment during my apprenticeship with Nick last year. I was, yeah, I had a couple of sessions with a client, and there was a rub. Something wasn't quite sitting. So I asked for a bit of supervision. We had a conversation, and Nick asked, "It's like, what energy were you in during the call?" It's like, what do you mean? And so, well, forget about what questions you asked or the words or anything. Like, what energy were you in? I thought about the day. So, that was a really, I was experiencing a lot of stress and a lot of stress thinking that day. And I think I was rushed. Maybe we were getting towards the end of a session. And it was such a breakthrough moment to realize actually, I think one of the most important things is the energy we're in, not necessarily the words we say. And it's not to devalue the words. A powerful question is a powerful question. A series of words can absolutely encourage an insight. But I think the real magic that's going on in coaching calls is when a coach is very aware of the energy they're in. And I don't just think that's a coaching skill. I think that's a human skill. You can learn that and you can take it everywhere. If you're a musician, you can be the guy that goes on the gig. And when all hell is, and actually this ties into reacting versus creating, when the shit has hit the fan and the back line's broken and this is getting the sound guy's drunk and the bassist hasn't shown up. And these are all real, real world examples that you can choose to be the person that is calm, the safest point in that room. And you will bring the energy down in the room just by grounding yourself in that way and not getting caught up in the maelstrom. For yourself during a composing session, you know, maybe you've got a guest vocalist in and they can't quite nail a piece and they're getting more and more in their head. And you're the person that's like, okay, cool. And you exude that energy, you bring them back down. There's a really cool thing I learned from NLP, which I think most of us are familiar with. If no one, if there's anyone who isn't, neuro linguistic programming, um, you can raise your energy to the energy where someone's at, and then begin to slow yourself down, and their energy will drop with you. It's been really effective whenever I've taught groups of kids and they're just, you know, they've had 5 bowls of Cocoa Pops for breakfast and they're just going mad. And you just try and come up to their level and then bring them back. But yeah, that's what came up for me when you were sharing that, Sash.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's within itself a choice, isn't it, to be able to present yourself like that and be a leader within a space of going in with calmness.
Mm. And it is infectious because we all want to feel calm, right? We all want clarity. We all like the feeling of being around a calm person. I think whatever profession you're in, provided you work at a standard that is good enough, that difference alone, being the calm in the room and showing up like that, can make the world of difference across a career.
I think your brain will start to associate it as well. So if that person's consistently calm when you're around them, as soon as you're then in their presence, you immediately feel it, don't you? It's the same with like if you go to therapy, you go in the room and already you're like, because you know that that's kind of a precedent of
Mm.
that stillness because you've like associated it with it.
Yeah, the body remembers. Yeah. Amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
Hey everyone. I was steering myself out of a skid when I first joined the call. I was listening, but I didn't want to be hustling around and distract anyone. But I've been here since the get-go. And wow, so much great stuff to unpack here. And lightning round, no particular order. The sacred pause, reacting versus creating. I wish more people took the time. I wish this were part of our cultural conversations, right? And it's not, but I'm also grateful that we can be here today speaking about this because in terms of affecting one's quality of mind and quality of life and effectiveness in the world and in relationship, I mean, there is nothing more important than that ability to, after stimulus, wait a minute, just give it 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it takes. Walk away from the computer, put the phone down, come back, take a deep breath. Okay, what's needed here? What's needed here in terms of a response, not a reaction? Because to me, the reactions happen instantaneously, right? And can quickly, in the wrong context or in difficult circumstances, spiral out of control. And then we forget where we started and how we got here. So love that. I'm so glad this keeps coming up. It really resonates with me. And also, I couldn't help but be reminded, I think it's from Poor Richard's Almanac, but that old adage of think before you speak. I mean, it's right there. We all sort of grow up hearing that. And if it was from Poor Richards, that means it came from Ben Franklin, which means it probably came from the Stoics somewhere, right, Jeff? So there's that, and I'm struck too by how another thing that comes up here in these chapters is, this is also a leadership skill, and the thing is, leadership can transfer. It could be in a conversation between two people. We can trade leadership back and forth, right? Not to mention a room full of people, and especially then if we're officially in a position of leadership, we can all use that to set the appropriate emotional tone for the situation. The situation might be we want to be too cool for school and just bring it, like, let's bring it all down. And if we're patient enough, I find at least frequently, if not most times, when I need to do that, in almost any environment, it works. Sometimes it might take longer than we would like, but if we're patient, it'll either work, or the people who don't respond to it will go about doing what they were going to do anyway. But it's not on us. We've decided, I'm not going to take on their energy. I'm going to stay parked right here, and not leave my, not leave my zone of control over emotional control. So I think that's part of leadership too. And the last thing I would say is that in this reacting versus creating, there's I'm forgetting where I heard this first. I can share it, but boy, it comes up all the time in conversations in my world. So scientific study of chimpanzees showed that chimps tend to mimic the behaviors of the 5 other chimps in the tribe around whom they spend the most time. So we are the product of the, we'll say, 5 people that we spend the most time with or interact with most often. So therefore, we need to choose our chimps very carefully. And we can decide okay, you know what, these relationships, that work situation, not good for me. So even if I need to, like, for me, it's my family of origin, which is kind of in flames right now, my siblings and my parents, and it's very complicated. But I have to engage there. But just this morning, had to take about 4 or 5 sacred pauses at different times in a text thread and on a telephone call or 2, and also acknowledging I love these people. I'll always be connected to them, but I know the pitfalls of over engaging, taking on too much of their stuff. On the flip side of it, I'm starting to seek out in my social environment here and very deliberately, the people that I know lift me up and lift up my energy. And on this, looking forward into a new year and new dreams and hopes and desires, those are the people that I want to be around. And one individual, it's interesting because I thought there was someone who used to be that for me, and I went back and visited with him the other day, spontaneously stopped by his house, had a chit chat, and I realized he's not there right now. He can't be one of my chimps right now, and it's okay. I can be there for him as a friend, but I can't take on his stuff. It's not. I need to move in a different direction than from where it seems he's heading at the moment. So that's totally fine. There you go. That's what I've got to share for the moment.
Thank you. I love the term the sacred pause, and I've learnt it from you, and I think you mentioned it in the previous cohort of Domino once. I think I was sharing about how lately I don't feel the need to talk as much, and I think you mentioned, man, the sacred pause is a superpower. And it can be a bit what's the word I'm looking for? Creepy, or a bit if it a bit weird if you're not used to someone taking an extended pause during a conversation. It can be a bit like, I remember the first time that happened, I experienced that, and my mind created immediately like, oh, you fucked this up. You've said something, and they're thinking of how upset they are, and they're going to tell you off and all this. And now I'm really used to it, and I'm getting more comfortable doing it myself. I still catch myself using the crutch, noises, fill the gap. But I think it's quite telling that it's more the exception than the rule, that we find it uncomfortable until we get used to just a moment of pause and a bit of space between words, or between an exchange of sentences in a conversation.
And we get to set it up and say, give me a minute. I'm going to think about how I would like to respond to this right now, or I'm reflecting upon what you just said. And that can put people at ease, because it is when we are that person taking the pause, it gives us actually a lot of perceived power in that conversation, which we presumably use wisely, and not to manipulate other people, but just, again, to, I've heard what you said, and I want to offer something of value in return. So yeah.
Hmm. And then you it sounded like towards the end you were pointing at like choosing the chimps. I didn't realize it was because I've heard that, um we take on the mannerisms of sort of the five people we spend the most time with. I didn't realize it came from a study with chimps. But yeah, amazing. Um and it sounded like you were pointing at sort of uh taking overly taking responsibility for other people, or not doing that, as you were sort of pointing. It's like, you can't be one of the chimpanzees right now. Um, and is that what you were sort of pointing at?
Yes. Choosing not to spend time with or expose ourselves to other people's, even their even when they're people that we love. We do have a choice in how and how often we engage with them. I can call my mother and sit and listen to her for a half an hour and be there and support and help, let her feel heard. But that doesn't mean that I call her because I need to talk to her. I need to seek her counsel or whatever. I just, out of familial obligation and loyalty and love, yes, I need to continue to show up for my mother as needed. But in my day to day, she's not a person that I turn to for advice, counsel, support. And it could be friends too, but we, again, we take responsibility here. This is, if we want to talk about what we're creating, this is what we're creating. I mean, we are curating our emotional environment by selecting the people that we are going to give our trust to, and draw energy and inspiration from. At the same time, we have a lot to give back to it. So we're not just takers. This is a reciprocal thing with our five. We'll stick with the five chosen chimps. We need to be able to give them all of our, or however many chimps, all of our support in return. And but I think we are just used to falling into patterns with people, and we just sort of bounce around, and we forget, oh, this doesn't feel good. I'm not happy. I'm not happy in this relationship or this conversation, and I really like these people, but I don't feel like I belong here right now, and that's okay. I don't have to make a big deal out of it. I'm not judging anybody, but I think I need to look out for myself here. Nurture, not protect. My headspace, my heart space. And the other thing, oh, Sasha, you were talking about the collective energy in a room. And that leads me to thinking of these, again, like these very primal behaviors that are ingrained so deeply in our brains that they're there for a reason. The school's a fish, moving like this because nobody wants to be out of the school because then you're vulnerable to a predator. And that's still there within us, but it is really remarkable. I love that you brought that up because, yeah, in so many circumstances, it's like if we start to tune into that, not only can we help affect it, but we can also sort of, I think it's a way of silently showing support or gently, without saying anything about it, reading the room and knowing what's needed. If somebody's is vibrating at too high a frequency, maybe they need to open up their waves a little bit, and settle. And that's I think there was also research around that, about the electromagnetic energy that's communicated from our heart, which is, gives off electrical impulses, as we know, but that within a certain physical space can be communicated. We don't have to say or do anything, but if we're edgy, people are going to pick up on it, and they're not going to know why. Maybe even in a Zoom call, Will, I don't know. But in terms of like your client, if you were not in person with this client, but speaking in a Zoom call too, maybe there's some way that can still happen. The EMFs can travel from one end of the line to the other.
I can, yeah. It is interesting.
Maybe.
Through a screen, you can I think I can still sense. I can still pick up on a shift in energy. And the face and the direction people look in tends to also give you a bit more of a visual, physical cue. Um, Man, there's a couple of things you said there that I'd love to quickly bounce in on. Well, it's that word you said, that bouncing around, and that really struck a chord with me. That is what it's felt like when I don't know, two couple of years ago. It's happened since, but a couple of years ago, I was completely not who's sitting here now, and I was highly reactive, uh, and quite volatile at times. And part of my story has been, um, I'm angry. I'm an angry that's been one of the nouns that's like, okay, will equals angry person, short temper, uh, and that I'm just thinking about the ingredients that go into it. That kind of yes man, open door policy, that lack of nurturing and protection of my time and my energy, um, my reactivity. It felt like just be like life was happening to me and bouncing around. It's like a ship in a storm and just getting knocked left, right, and center. Um, Yeah, yeah. So I just wanted to speak to that. There's this when we're reacting and we're running on pure emotion in a moment, it can feel like that. The ship's rudder's gone, and we are just bopping around. Um, and it got me thinking what you're saying, like we can fall into patterns with people. And actually, I think yeah, and I think it's at least this looks true to me, is that the people that are often closest to us, we struggle with the most. I tend to react at my most when there's a stimulus from someone very close to me. I might get, I might see the phone ring, my mum, my sister, you know, but I got my head down, and a minute later it rings again, and I'm like, I'm not in the zone anymore. 100% of my focus is on like what's gone, what's happened, what's wrong, who's done what, who said what, like, and I'm there, and it's like a firefighter. Like the alarm's gone, and I switch, and it's yeah, it's I think for me at least in my experience, that pattern of or falling into that pattern, it's with the people who are closest to us where this stuff really lingers. Um, so thank you for I've got a lot out of you pointing in that direction. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Chris, before we move on?
Two things. Remind me to tell you on that note of um, the angry person volatility. Remind me to tell you my Abbey Road story. I won't do it here now, but the next, and that's not a teaser for everybody else. It was actually one of the most difficult days of my life, the day that I got to work at Abbey Road. But I'll debrief with Will about that in a separate conversation. Uh, I heard we throw a lot of metaphors around here. The last thing I'll say is stretching a shoe. Dennis, was that something that you brought up when you were talking? You know, I heard passing reference to that when the call first started. If regardless, I heard that, and I've been in a place where I'm thinking about a lot of these tools we have now, or that I have now, and even as we talk about the sacred pause and trying to let that become more of an habituated and a natural response and not have to think about it, I still am cautious sometimes of like thinky. Oh, you know this. Where take around in there. You know how to deal with this, and it's tedious, and I think it's misguided, based on some of the reading that I've done lately in Michael Neal's book, actually, too. And what I love about the idea of stretching the shoe is that that's what we're doing here, isn't it? We're stretching ourselves, and and it's more about allowing allowing the behaviors and just resting in them and being in them, and not worrying about when we fall short of our own standard for ourselves, or we react, we're triggered by a family member or whatever. But like, it's a good reminder for me to be patient. Like, leather takes a long time to break in. And you have to walk a lot of miles before it starts to become this soft, comfortable home, home for our foot. And there's a lot of, so I thank you all for that. Whoever mentioned that early on, I had a little mini insight there. That's it. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Karen.
I knew you'd come to me right now. I've got to go.
Oh no.
And drive. I will be listening. Oh, there's so much I wanted to say. Should have put my hand up earlier. Yeah, no, it's no point me even starting because I've literally got to get in the car now. I'll be listening and then I'll be able to talk again about 8:15.
Cool. We'll circle back around.
Yeah, but there is something. Oh no, because then I want to hear your answer, and just in case that's right. Yeah, come back later. Or not. Miss my genius, it's fine.
We'll come back at court.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to go off so I don't distract you with my video.
All right. Thank you. Sean.
How do, folkies? Am I normal voice? Well, that's a debate that will rage on for years. Yeah. Yeah, I really like this, the direction that this has taken, and there's loads of things that I wrote down. They're related to what's been said tonight, as well as from the section, and it was one of the things that came, and it was kind of stimulated by the chapter where he's talking about getting out the Lego, and kind of the creation around Lego, and within that, there was also that thought of even how Lego has changed and has almost been manipulated in the modern version of Lego. So I remember when I was a kid, last week, and we got a Lego set for Christmas, and it was basically a set of Lego bricks, and then whatever you built with it is whatever came to mind to build with it. Okay. Whereas now, when you buy a Lego set, you get a full set of instructions that you have to follow, which then tells you how the Lego should look when you've finished. And the phrase that came to me is that we're actually diluting our creation. So societally, we're kind of. I'm trying not to sound too militant, old fartish about it, but it is. But we're kind of, you look at the number of areas across life and across society where creativity and creation is almost being dampened down and discouraged. So you can see why people slip into the reaction side of things so easily. And then when they get ideas about what they want to do or what they want to create or what it would be cool to do, how easy it can become to then retreat away from that because it doesn't meet the instructions that we're told we should conform to, I'm becoming quite anti-conformist in my old age. And maybe that's for good reason. Maybe that's because it's that suppressed creativity, if you like, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. And it drew me to the I've got the page open because I just love reading it over and over. But the section 4 within the thing where it's like, now live your life as a poet, and that phrase where he says, a child who does not play is not a child, but the man who does not play has lost forever the child who lived in him, and we will miss him terribly. And that was for me. When I read that, I was just like, oh, do you know what? That's it. That's it. It's just like, life's meant to be played. We're just supposed to play. And I know that the moments in my life that are the juiciest are the ones when I've been doing stuff playfully and I've been playing with it, and the ones where I've got bogged down and heavy and serious have been the ones where play's kind of been put on a shelf or sort of locked in a box or something, because it's allowed to be playful. And I like to play with things. I like to be impish about stuff sometimes, because it just occurs to me to be that way. It just occurs, but yeah, that dilution, and it was interesting. Well, again, it made a link in my synapses, but there was a funeral today of a drag queen up here in the Northwest called the Vivian, and it even made me think of drag queens in relation to this expression of creativity, and almost it reminded me of an idea I had years ago and it might have been done, I don't know, but it just occurred to me about having a like a radio show, and it was like all about sort of that deep expression that gets locked up, that gets kind of a lid's put on it, and everything gets dampened down, and with drag queens, that the idea of people kind of giving it a big kind of middle finger to society of no, that this is what I want to do, and I know that's just kind of one sort of avenue, if you like, but that comes across in all kinds of things, in terms of how many people are not be their best selves because they put a lid on creative ideas that they've got, that have landed there for a reason, but then they've convinced themselves that it's not, not valid or not going to be accepted or whatever. And then from the energetic thing, I loved it when Sasha was talking about the energy, and Chris carried it on, and I wrote in the chat the law of sympathetic resonance, which I was listening to on a podcast today about the old tuning fork thing, that if you bang one tuning fork and there's other tuning forks in the room, they'll start to vibrate even though there's been no direct stimulus to them. And I'm like, yeah, that's us as an energy as well. When people talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with the term mood hoover or energy vampires, those people who, as soon as they come in a room, it just pulls saps the life out of the conversation and the energy. And it's like, we talk about it jokingly, but actually energetically, that can be a thing. And similarly, at the opposite end of the spectrum, there's those people who, when they enter a room, it just kind of lifts everything up, you know. Or if we watch somebody and we're immediately kind of drawn and or repelled or what have you, it just makes complete sense. Yeah, and in terms of the whole reacting versus creating thing, it just occurred to me when we were talking how easy it is to react because of that. And again, you know, I don't like using the word conditioning, but I guess at some level it is, isn't it? It's as we learn and we're going through life, we're conditioned that we react to something out there that's, you know, this, you know, and I remember sort of a similar thing, reacting versus responding was something I came across, a Bob Proctor thing years ago. And it was that same thing of having the pause, you know, having that strategic. I just reminded myself of me brain. Sorry, I do jump around quite a bit, but when you were talking before about the sacred pause, I was going to put in the chat, that's what my dog's got. You know, it's just how I roll. Yeah, so that's kind of. I'll leave you with that one.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, you pointed to a lot of things there, and I've got an eye on the time, so I'll keep this very brief. A lot of what you were pointing to sounded like the sort of, yeah, the dilution of creativity, or the restraining of creative expression. And it reminded me of has everyone watched Step Brothers with Will Ferrell? And yeah, it's a hilarious film. But there's a great bit at the end where they're both basically two men children. They're in their 40s, but you know, behave like kids. Um, and towards the end of the film, they get real jobs, and they're very serious. And the dad, and one of them, it's his sort of stepdad, takes them both aside. He's like, "Oh, this is awful. It's like, just to see you both so downtrodden and normal." And then he tells this story. He's like, you know, when I was a kid, I used to pretend to be a dinosaur, and I'd run around the neighborhood and terrorize all the other kids and all this. And then all of a sudden I was 18, and my dad said, "Stop pretending to be a fucking dinosaur and go to medical school." So I went. I said, "Cool, I'll stop the dinosaur thing. I'll go. I'll get qualified. I'll practice medicine for a bit, and then I'll come back to it." And then he's like, "And when I came back, I'd forgotten how. I'd lost my dinosaur." Um, and there's a distinction that I made for myself. It's childlike versus childish. And I think that a lot of people go into adulthood and develop a really dysfunctional view of what being an adult is, and what it should look like, and what the experience of adulthood should be. And they put things like play in the childish box. And that's why I created that distinction for myself. So, well, hang on, yeah, childish, maybe not. Like, you don't want to be dealing with, you know, adult children, people that emotionally are very young, you know. Yeah, okay, there's some difficulty around that. But to be childlike, to play like a child, to express like a child, to create like kids, like, you'll never see a kid get out of a sandpit and ask you if they played right, if they did it right. Like, that's being childlike. So fucking do that. Not, yeah, don't worry about the childish thing. But it's funny when people, the term adulting, You'll hear that thrown around a lot. Oh, I did some serious adulting this week. Oh, what have you been up to? And then they'll list the most mind-numbingly awful things. And then they've given the game away. It's like, so your view of being an adult is serious, austere, not playful, not creative, doing the right thing, doing what needs to be done, not what you want to do. So yeah, man, I could speak more, but I don't want to take up more space. Thank you, Sean. Elizabeth. Oh, Karen, sorry, I'm gonna check quickly. Karen, are you back and available to talk, or are you driving? Hmm.
No, I'm free to go to Elizabeth.
Don't know where the lag begins and ends. Karen, I think we'll go to Elizabeth next, and then we'll circle back around just because the signal's breaking up. Elizabeth.
Thanks. I'll keep this short so we can go to Karen. Hopefully we can hear you next time, Karen. You're cutting in and out a lot right there. I really enjoyed this section a lot, and it reminded me of a coaching course that I started taking in the spring as I was just kind of getting into what is this coaching thing all about. And what they talked a lot about, like the concept in this particular frame of coaching course, was that every conversation is going alongside in the reactive to creative journey, right? And there are moments, and there were particular places that popped out in the section that really echoed that and really resonated with me, that I'll read like super quickly, like creating versus reacting. When reacting is based on mood, like what if I get into the habit of noticing, stepping back, asking how can I create? And that segs into what you were saying, Will, like given what is happening, what would you like to create? Like it starts with noticing. It starts with allowing awareness of like where you are and how you're showing up and how you're allowing even your thoughts of how of what is occurring. It all starts with noticing. And the option, one bit that he got into, the option for creating exists in every moment. Like there's always a choice. So it's like it's noticing, and then there's the choice. Like, what are you going to do with that? And then the last bit that really resonated was, who else knows what you want? Right? It's like when you're reacting, when you're in reaction mode, you're allowing yourself to move with mood, to mood with circumstances, others' expectations, could be anything, right? And when you notice, allow and notice, acknowledge, and choose, you're then able to get to the core of what it is that you want, and you create that. So, yeah, this is powerful for me.
You've just helped me have an insight there. There's so much yes man energy baked into that reactivity. What you've just pointed to sounds a lot like what Chris was pointing to, that open door policy, everything and anything is welcome, and the ship just gets rocked, and we're bouncing, and life is happening to us. And I love what you say, getting into the habit of noticing, because that is you you can't get off the hamster wheel until you notice there's a hamster wheel and that
Yeah.
you're running and that your running is keeping it going.
Yes.
That's the role you're playing in it. But it all starts with the noticing. Hmm. Thank you. Karen.
Hi. Right. Well, I'm now sort of, there's so much I wanted to say about energy and stuff like that because that's my thing. But I'm now thinking that perhaps I shouldn't say that and we should move on to other things because we haven't even covered the bit about the problems. Oh God, I'm trying to find it in the book. I can hardly read it. So there's how can a problem be good? And all of my notes were on the first bit of it that I've sort of missed. But I was just thinking about, well, if we think about a problem as just a stimulus, and then we take some space and get out of our ego, and our child, I love that. Our childhood, you know, what was it? Our inner child built from other people's emotional reactions. It's all ego, isn't it? It's all trying to protect ourselves from being hurt. And but if a problem is just a stimulus, then that's brilliant because when I'm thinking about all, like we start off in this little book and it's got quite a few, just a few little chapters at a time, not very many words. And then by the time somebody starts saying something, and then we've got a billion ideas ourselves, and then someone else, we go down another route, and all of a sudden, there's just loads of things because we're stimulated by each other's ideas, and that sends us off down another alleyway. And if a problem is a stimulus like that, then it's brilliant. Because if we didn't have them, would we be as stimulated? Like when I think about clients, I think, oh, what do I do with my clients? I don't know really. And then I've got one in front of me and I know exactly what I'm doing because I am responding to their stimulus. And oh, just a quick aside in that one, when we're talking about the energy, and that whenever that's part of like calibration, isn't it? There's energy that you're feeling inside. If you're feeling anxious, and the chances are the other person's feeling anxious. So you can bring that to the table and say, hey, what's going on? I'm feeling this anxiousness. Are you feeling that too? What's that about? I love that. And the other thing, just moving on because time and everything, in the how can being in love be easy bit, I really like that Steve Hardison says like, oh, what do you want? As Elizabeth said. And then he said, oh, well, yeah, someday. And Steve says, what someday? Which one? And in being specific about what you want, then creation becomes a series of steps to action. Like what all the time is like, I want to spend more time with my girlfriend. And then all of a sudden, well, when are you going to get married? Oh, are you going to get married? And when are you going to get married? And what month? And then what are you going to do about it? Then all of a sudden a plan has happened and they're married. And if Steve hadn't have said that, would they still be just going out? Who knows? I just love that the fact that we need to be specific. And this just circles all the way back to the beginning when Jeff was saying about start with the end in mind. And you've got to have a bit of an idea where you're going. You can be flexible as to how you get there. But that when you're specific, you can do something with that. I could waffle on for ages, so I won't. I'll just stop there.
Still muted. Thank you. We've got 6 minutes. If did you want to go into the energy bit that you wanted to talk about?
I think, we've got the ego and we've got this connection, this interconnectedness, and we know that we're connected. I mean, if you look at quantum science and stuff, like if I wave my arm around, then somewhere, because our electrons are in space, somewhere somebody can feel that I'm impacting them in some way. So we know that we can have an impact on other people. But at the same time, we don't have to be a victim of that, because we've always got the choice. If we notice, as Elizabeth said, where are our feelings? Where does it feel like they're coming from? Well, actually, we're the creator of our feelings. We can pick up on senses from people, but we don't have to take that on. We do have a choice, just in recognizing that, all right, I'm picking up on something here. Okay, well, that's coming. I might energetically feel the mood hoover in the room, but I'm not going to let them do that, because I can be the person who lifts the energy in the room. Like you said, there's always those people as well. And that we're never a victim. We have a choice, even when it seems like, as Chris said, like just everything. I'm now waffling because I'm sitting in the dark and I can't read my notes. But we never. And the other thing, like sometimes just to stop, even when you're coaching with someone, and just let somebody talk, and you don't even have to be listening to them. I think it was Jamie Smart who said, if you were just a telegraph pole and someone was talking to you as a telegraph pole, you'd still be giving them service, just because they hear things in themselves. And if we're bringing out their inner gold, they can hear it when they start talking. So we don't have to respond at all. Or we can respond with silence and allow them to do more talking and hear it for themselves. So that wasn't what I was going to say earlier, but I think everyone has gone in on so many different angles that I'm just going to be like, it'll be nitpicky little pieces. So probably not necessary. But a really cool exploration. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's just as useful to sit with the energy that someone's in and pick up on that. You don't have to hang on every single word. Just notice the energy. And that's something I've learned is listening, or deep listening, doesn't just mean words. Like what is being spoken. There's a few more dimensions going on. Thank you. I'm aware of time. Got a couple of minutes. Chris?
My stepmother is one of those who talks. She will, in this process of talking, speaking to someone else, but really she's working out verbally. I feel for her. She's tortured by her thoughts often in her mind, and it can go, her monologues can go in every direction all at once, and she's just whipped about. And there was an incident last week where I was over, my dad and my stepmom live in Nashville also. And I was over their house to visit with my father, and we suddenly heard this great ruckus out front. And adding to the chaos in her and their lives, she decided to foster, but now it's looking like she's going to adopt a pit bull, a 2-year-old pit bull, and they already have 3 cats. in a small house that's very crowded. There's no room to move already, and now we've got a dog. But anyway, somehow what we heard this big ruckus outside, and somehow the dog got out, and somehow it wound up chasing one of the cats 2 doors down, and the neighbors are getting involved now. And it's this whole thing. So I would go down after it's all settled. I'd go into the basement with her, and I listened to her go on for about 45 minutes, and so much stuff came out. I'm used to this. I've known her a long time, and I love her, and I know her process, and I've been taught patience as a listener in these conversations with her. So she went on for about 45 minutes and touched on 10 different topics, all things that had been stressing her out. And she's been through a lot of loss recently, and my dad's older than she is, and she's sort of starting to consider the ramifications of what when he's not around, and that factors into the dog. After all, when she had finally talked herself to a point where she needed to take a breath, I said, I asked the question that you asked me, Will, a couple of weeks ago, what we're talking about right now. I thought, thinking as I did, I wonder what's going to happen. Kate, what do you want to create right now? What do you want? And wow, talk about stopping someone in their tracks. I never realized what a powerful question that was. It gave me great pause, Will, when you asked me that question in our session. And that completely redirected the next hour of our conversation between my stepmother and I. And what I love about the anecdote shared in the book is that you want to get married. What day? What do you want? Just tell me what you want, and we'll go from there. And he even says, we'll make it fun. Let's just forget, just to make it fun, like take the heat out of it. Let's just put a date on the calendar and start there. One thing leads to another, and what do you know? That issue has resolved itself, But I didn't realize what a powerful question that was to ask someone, especially someone I care about deeply, And I intend to use it again. I'm probably going to have to use it again a few more times in the next week or so. But there you go. That's just what I wanted to offer.
Thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful way to end this week's call as well with my therapist would call that counseling in action. It's where you've picked up something in a conversation somewhere, and then you go and play with it. And then you really see the power of it when it's applied in real life. In coaching, those are called cutting questions. And I'll leave you with this. They are really useful when someone's reacting. And when you see them getting more and more in their head, cut straight through it. Is that true? What do you want? Really short, snappy questions tend to back down to earth. Back into the ground. So yeah, amazing that you took something there and saw the power of it. Amazing. Thank you for went over a couple of minutes. There was a lot today. So thank you for bearing with and going a little bit over the agreed time. Are we complete for this week? Amazing.
We left it all on the field, mate.
Sorry?
We left it all on the field.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for all that you brought today. I'll either see you in calls throughout the week or on Thursday in Domino or next Monday. Have a good one, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.